In the early hours of the morning on November 29, 1987, a Korean passenger plane exploded mid-flight after a bomb had detonated inside of it. The perpetrator was a North Korean secret spy, mass murderer, and actress named Kim Hyon-hui, who could be as soft-hearted as she was deadly. Born on January 27, 1962 in Kaesong, a southern city that was the only one to change hands from South Korean to North Korean control as a result of the Korean War's Armistice Agreement in 1953. Kim was a bright and energetic child who excelled in school and at various extracurricular activities such as acting and dancing. Her mother was a housewife and her father was a lifelong diplomat who eventually relocated the family to the North Korean capital of Pyongyang and for a short time to Cuba, where he was briefly stationed on assignment. It was in Pyongyang at the age of 10 that Kim would get her first taste of government conscription when she was selected to present flowers to a senior South Korean delegate at the North-South talks held in the capital. While still in grade school, Kim starred in North Korea's first Technicolor film, and she wanted to pursue acting as a career. However, shortly after finishing her primary studies and enrolling at Pyongyang University, her life would take a dramatic and unexpected turn. A short time after beginning her university classes, Kim was singled out for recruitment by the Reconnaissance General Bureau, or the RGB, North Korea's intelligence agency, for her beauty and brains. Unlike companies and government agencies like the CIA, who also routinely seek out college recruits, the RGB's recruitment method is less persuasive and more appropriation, in that the candidate doesn't really have a say in the matter. Once Kim was officially enrolled in RGB training, everything changed from her name, Kim Ok-hwa, to her residence, a military college just outside of Pyongyang, to her daily life, which became a routine of physical fitness, martial arts training, and Japanese lessons so that she could pass as a Japanese woman. Interestingly, Kim's Japanese instructor at the military college was none other than Yeiko Taguchi, a Japanese citizen kidnapped by North Korean operatives in 1978. At the time, the North Korean government was kidnapping many Japanese people and forcing them to teach Japanese language and culture at North Korean spy schools, while the older victims were abducted for the purpose of obtaining their identities. One of the more well-known cases of North Korean kidnappings, Yeiko Taguchi, was a young divorced mother when she disappeared after dropping her children off at daycare on her way to work. More than 24 years later, in 2002, North Korea admitted that she and others had been abducted, but claimed that she had died on July 30, 1986, in a routine traffic accident. This account, however, is disputed by her former pupil, Kim Hyon-hui, who stated that Taguchi, known to her as hyon-hui, was living in a facility controlled by North Korea's Ministry of Defense as late as 1987, so she could not have died in 1986. Kim still believes that Yeiko is alive today and that the North Korean government is afraid that state secrets will be made public if they return her and other abductees. Overall, Kim spent 7 years learning various facets of spycraft, such as multiple languages, rigging explosives, and how to use credit cards, which didn't even exist in North Korea. Perhaps most importantly, she learned how to kill using her bare hands and feet, as well as with grenades and assault rifles. Such extensive training is typical of Pyongyang, which, according to other RGB agents who have defected, like Kim Dong-sik, considers spies very important and treats them on the same level as army generals, with their education being similarly rigorous. Part of her final exam required her to infiltrate and memorize a document from a mock embassy. After getting a PhD-level education in spy training, Kim was paired with an experienced agent who would go on to be both her field trainer, accomplice on missions, and spiritual father, as she has called him. Kim Sung-il was an intelligence department lifer who was now in his late 50s or early 60s, had vast overseas experience, spoke 4 languages fluently, and was also an electronics technician, which made him an ideal partner for the mission Kim would later be assigned. Like all field agents, Kim had no say in her assignments, which the RGB always made sure to add an extra thick layer of propaganda onto, much like seasoning a turkey before shoving it in the oven. Such brainwashing, as Hyon-hui herself has called it, takes the form of songun, or military first. The roots of the military first policy can be traced back to the founder of the North Korean state, Kim Il-sung, who believes that fortifying the state and turning every soldier into a party conduit would make the nation sovereign and independent. From a young age, Hyon-hui had to listen to how songun ensures the fatherland's safety and how it's the only thing preventing North Korea's eternal enemies from attacking the country. Enduring years of such psychological conditioning is enough to turn even level-headed people into utterly obedient tools of their spy masters, the North Korean state. In Kim Hyon-hui's case, the mind games consisted of no less than making her believe she would contribute to reunifying the two Koreas if she completed a special mission close to the dear leader's heart. Up until only recently, the North's long-standing goal was to eventually reunify the two Koreas, or rather to subjugate the South to its will. So, to receive an assignment impacting reunification at the tender age of only 25 was considered a major honor and a privilege. This is the guise under which Hyon-hui took the order that she and Kim Sung-il would soon be given a top-secret project that must be accomplished without fail. The instruction to plant bombs on a South Korean airliner was delivered to the pair by the chief of the intelligence department on October 7, 1987. By the North's twisted logic, the terrorist act would have the effect of discouraging countries from participating in the upcoming Seoul, South Korea Summer Olympics in 1988, bring to an end the South's attempts to perpetuate the division between the two Koreas, and deal a fatal blow to the South Korean puppet regime. To carry out the secretive task that only North Korea's top brass and the two agents assigned to it knew about, Kim would need to lean heavily on Sung-il's expertise and put into practice all of her extensive training. As a pregame to the main task, the two agents received some further last-minute explosives handling training in Pyongyang from October 7th until November 10th. From there, the two Kims, along with an intelligence department section chief by the name of Choe, accompanied them, traveled by plane from Pyongyang to Moscow, one of the only places freely accepting North Korean passport holders without requiring additional information about the reason for their visit. However, just 2 days before they were to depart, the two would receive news that shook them to their core, yet made them feel proud at the same time. First, the intelligence chief informed them that the order for the mission came directly from Kim Il-sung's son and heir apparent, Kim Jong-il himself, which was an immense honor in their eyes. And then he read out the final instruction. Korean Air Flight 858, departing from Baghdad, Iraq to Seoul, South Korea, at 11:30 p.m. on November 28, 1987, would be planted with explosives. Once in the heart of the Soviet Union on November 12th, Kim and Sung-il traveled to Warsaw Pact member Budapest, Hungary, the following morning without Choe, where they would spend the next 6 days at a secret location prepared by the North Korean embassy. Here, they would be given forged Japanese passports under the assumed names of Hashiya Shinichi and Hashiya Mayumi, a presumably innocent father and daughter traveling on vacation to Vienna, Austria. The aliases proved effective as the pair was able to pass all border and security checks in Vienna and travel on to Belgrade, Yugoslavia, where they would be met by 2 North Korean guidance officers carrying some all-important cargo. It was about 7 p.m. on November 27th, in room 811 at the Metropolitan Hotel in Belgrade, that Kim Hyon-hui and Kim Sung-il received the tools necessary to carry out their mission. A Panasonic radio that was actually a time bomb containing 350 grams of C4 explosive and a liquor bottle containing 700 milliliters of PLX explosive. All that was left now was to travel to Baghdad and board Korean Air Flight 858. Following a 3-hour layover at Saddam Hussein International Airport, the two Kims boarded Flight 858 20 minutes before its departure at 11:30 p.m. The plane had recently been repainted and coincidentally sported an official airline sticker for the upcoming 1988 Summer Olympics in Seoul. Once on board, they stored the time bomb and explosives, which were inside their luggage, in the overhead compartment above their seats. The time bomb had been set to detonate in approximately 9 hours. 3.5 hours later, at about 3 a.m. local time, the Kims got off the plane at its first stopover at Abu Dhabi International Airport in the UAE and left their luggage and the explosives on the plane. Inexplicably, no cabin crew bothered to check the overhead compartments for lost or left behind luggage, and the plane took off again after refueling. Some 6 hours later, as Flight 858 was flying over the Andaman Sea towards its next and final stop in Bangkok before landing in Seoul, the Kims' luggage, still sitting quietly in the overhead compartment above their former seats, exploded. The explosion instantly killed all 11 crew members and 104 passengers on board. There were no survivors. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were never recovered, but the pilot's final radio message shortly before the explosion was, "We expect to arrive in Bangkok on time. Time and location normal." 113 of the 115 people on board were South Korean nationals, which was likely to the satisfaction of the mastermind behind the attack, Kim Jong-il. As for the Kims, their original escape route, flying from Abu Dhabi to Amman, Jordan, and then back to Europe before returning to Pyongyang, was rerouted due to visa complications. The new plan was to fly to Bahrain before continuing to Europe, but as fate would have it, this detour would prove fateful and deadly. It was only a matter of time before someone, somewhere, would identify the pair's forged Japanese passports, and Bahraini airport officials were the ones to spot the fakes. However, the North Korean spies were fully prepared for such an eventuality. Along with the explosives, they had each been given cigarettes laced with enough cyanide inside to take their own lives in case they were apprehended at any point in their journey. This was done to protect their real identities from being found out and prevent the attack from being connected to the North Korean state. While being held at the airport for questioning by Bahraini authorities on the morning of December 1st, 1987, the two Kims each attempted to commit by chewing the filter tips of their cigarettes where the poison had been hidden. Kim Sung-il, or Hashiya Shinichi, died within several hours, but Kim Hyon-hui survived as she was restrained before she could take a big enough bite out of her filter. After regaining consciousness in a Bahraini hospital, Kim was uncooperative, deceptive, and combative. At first, she insisted that her name was Pai Shui-hui, an orphan from northern China who had met an elderly Japanese man with whom she was traveling. But the fact that the only form of Chinese that she spoke, Cantonese, is a southern Chinese dialect was inconsistent with her claim. This would last for several days, even after being extradited to South Korea, but two things would give her real identity away. First, the type of poison she tried to commit with had been used by other North Korean spies caught by the South in the past. Secondly, she was visibly awestruck by the humane treatment she received while detained, and by a film she was shown depicting everyday life in South Korea, which stood in stark contrast to the information she had been indoctrinated with her entire life. Kim was also taken on several occasions outside of her prison cell to see the prosperity of Seoul. In North Korea, she had been taught that the South was a corruption-riddled puppet of the United States and that poverty was widespread. Upon realizing that she had been living a lie, Kim threw herself into the arms of a female investigator and confessed her real identity. She took responsibility for the bombing of Flight 858 that happened only days earlier. For her crime, Kim was sentenced to be executed. However, she was later pardoned by former South Korean President Roh Tae-woo, who controversially stated, "Kim is as much a victim of the evil North Korean regime as the passengers aboard KAL 858. North Korea continues to deny involvement in the bombing of Flight 858, and no UN Security Council resolution has ever been passed against it for the terrorist act. Today, Kim resides in an undisclosed location with her South Korean husband, who's a former South Korean agent handling her case, and two children, and remains under around-the-clock state protection. Meanwhile, her family left behind in North Korea was arrested and sent to a labor camp. She has said in the past that she still feels like a prisoner or captive due to her overwhelming sense of guilt for the lives she took. But that is all for her story, or at least as of right now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.